The year is 2007. Ichiro Oda engages his fanbase with an arc that some might perceive as filler, but it is also recognized as a Thriller Bark arc. In this narrative, we are introduced to an antagonist named Gekko Moria who asserts that he discovered this island in the West Blue. Little did we anticipate that Oda would disclose 16 years later that God Valley was also an island located in the West Blue. God Valley was known for its coliseum used for the native hunting competition, which we saw take place right before the incident, which is strikingly similar to the awkward and random coliseum that the Straw Hats found in the middle of Thriller Bark. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, Oda is an absolute mastermind. Garp's earlier remark about his galaxy impact being less potent these days might be a subtle clue regarding his actions on God Valley, because it's plausible to speculate that Garp might have shattered God Valley and a fragment of that island was later discovered by Moria and renamed to Thriller Bark. This theory provides a plausible explanation to a few things, such as the abundance of Rocks pirate zombies on Thriller Bark, who all just so happen to appear before the Straw Hats right in front of that Thriller Bark Coliseum we just mentioned. That's alarmingly similar to the fact that those same Rocks pirates invaded a coliseum on God Valley in the first place. This theory also aligns with Vegapunk's reference to a scientist in the West Blue who is doing experiments with the weight of human souls. Vegapunk is obviously referencing Dr. Hogback, who must have been on God Valley in the past with Gekko Moria trying to revive these rock zombies. The facts and evidence you are going to learn today is going to leave you absolutely mind blown when it comes to the idea of Thriller Bark and God Valley being the exact same island. But before we jump into this theory video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss the sickest One Piece theory videos on all of YouTube. And my previous channel was hacked at 33,000 subscribers, so make sure you're subscribed to this brand new channel. Like, seriously, scroll down and double check. I want to express my deep gratitude to the Broken Tables podcast on YouTube, an awesome channel with consistent content. They inspired me to make this video in the first place. And of course, another shout out to Glacier and Irfan for their invaluable assistance in collecting evidence related to today's theory as well. All three are members of my Discord server, a space where you can engage with me and share your most imaginative theories. You can find it at discord.gg/333VIL. Now, the Thriller Bark arc was characterized by a blend of classic Oda style comedy and a dash of classic horror elements commonly seen in various forms of media. In this arc, the primary antagonist is Gekko Moria, a man with the power of the Shadow Fruit who tragically lost his entire crew to Kaido in the past. One thing we know about Gekko Moria is he had a lot of dialogue throughout this arc that ended up foreshadowing things in the far future. During the Thriller Bark arc, Gekko Moria mentioned that he found the island of Thriller Bark in the West Blue. Further later on in the story, around chapter 1095, we finally get to see God Valley and its inhabitants. While we were there, it was noted that God Valley is also located in the West Blue. So now we have this first piece of evidence how both of these islands were located in the same exact sea. In the Egghead Island arc, Oda presented a multitude of plot lines, but one of the particularly significant ones revolved around Garp's battle on Hachinosu Island. When Garp was fighting against the Blackbeard pirates and the crew, he was complaining how his Galaxy Fist is not strong like how it used to be. I think the plausible foreshadowing here is that Garp used Galaxy Impact in the past on God Valley, causing it to shatter and vanish. Now, in the Thriller Bark arc, we are also introduced to an ancient giant who later on has Luffy's shadow implanted within him. And throughout the whole last half of the arc, Oars was repeatedly mentioned to be a continent pooler. So now when we talk about how Gekko Moria got an island from the West Blue and brought it all the way to Paradise, Oars could be an explanation. But we also know that he wasn't really awakened and he wasn't really rejuvenated until Luffy got to Thriller Bark. I think Gekko Moria on his own accord managed to move God Valley from the West Blue all the way to Paradise unless Oda shows us something to where Oars was previously alive. And since he's the continent pooler, that'd be some crazy foreshadowing. Throughout the Straw Hat Pirates' exploration of Thriller Bark, the extravagant design of the castle and church is evident all around, adding to the unique atmosphere of the island. We can see all around throughout the Thriller Bark arc that they use classic architecture. Turning our focus to chapter 1095 and 1096, it's very apparent that God Valley has very similar architecture. And I don't think this is coincidence. I strongly believe that they moved God Valley from the West Blue all the way into the Paradise Sea. One of the significant aspects of the Thriller Bark Island is a particularly unsettling detail in relation to this theory. When the Straw Hats are running around the island fighting all these zombies, they happen to run into something they deem as a coliseum. Again, turning our focus to chapter 1094 and 1095, it's very clear that they had a coliseum on God Valley as well, where they were hosting a competition with the prizes being devil fruits. So not only are both of these islands from the West Blue, not only do they both have architecture, but they both even have coliseums, and that's so strange for Thriller Bark to randomly have a coliseum. A character who received a considerable amount of spotlight in both chapter 1096 and the God Valley incident is none other than our beloved revolutionary Bartholomew Kuma. We know that he was introduced into the story because of the Thriller Bark Bark arc when he came through and ransacked the island fighting against characters like Zoro. But once again, turning our focus to the God Valley incident, we can see a young Kuma was on God Valley as a slave. I think this is spectacular, stellar foreshadowing by Oda. Introduce Kuma in the Thriller Bark arc, and then later on in the story have him shown at God Valley because both of them are the same island. Towards the conclusion of the Thriller Bark arc, Kuma emerged as a significant threat, instigating a great deal of turmoil for the Straw Hat Pirates. And Kuma was essentially said that he was sent by the world government to capture Luffy on Thriller Bark. And it lines up perfectly to the God Valley incident where Kuma was a young slave getting bullied by a world government official known as Saturn. It's also funny to think about how earlier in the story, we know that Blackbeard basically captured and killed Absalom for his devil fruit. I'm thinking that there's a deeper reason to this, and he was essentially trying to lure out Gecko Moria. And this makes a lot of sense. Like, we know that Gecko Moria essentially used Thriller Bark to sail all the way to Hachinosu. Blackbeard is collecting all this rock stuff, and he parallels Roxy Zebek in a lot of ways. So Blackbeard knowing about Thriller Bark and God Valley being the same island would make perfect sense for Blackbeard and his goals. As to how Blackbeard would make this discovery, I'm not entirely sure. That's kind of a question mark at this point, but either way, it just lines up very well to Blackbeard's character. Let's also turn our attention to the Marineford arc. Doflamingo told Gecko Moria that someone higher than Sengoku wants to kill Moria, and I think this person higher than Sengoku is not the Gorsei, it's not Imu, it's Figurlin Garling and the Holy Knights. I believe they basically wanted to kill Gecko Moria for simply grabbing the final piece of God Valley, which is known to be a taboo secret. Which, by the way, the higher power that wanted to kill Moria parallels the Egghead Island arc, with how they said that Saturn is the highest power of the Celestial Dragons, making a parallel between the Thriller Bark arc and the Egghead Island arc. Luffy essentially defeating Moria in the pre-time skip and making it known made both Moria and the world government vulnerable, so they didn't find Moria useful anymore. So this makes a lot of sense. Like, they got tired of Gecko Moria. They watched him lose to Luffy, they see him take a piece of God Valley, like they don't want anything to do with him anymore. So what do? They use the Holy Knights to go after Moria and threaten to kill him. But remember earlier how we were saying that Blackbeard wants to lure out Gecko Moria and grab Thriller Bark since it's a piece of God Valley? I would argue that Blackbeard beat the world government to the punch because, again, Thriller Bark was sailed to Hachinosu Island. Now, in the current chapters 1095 and 1096, the Rocks Pirates are receiving substantial attention and are becoming a central focus. If we turn our attention to the Thriller Bark arc, we can see that there's a ton of rock zombies there completely lined up for us. Looking at chapter 957, we learn from Sengoku that the Rocks Pirates were essentially defeated and erased on God Valley. Among those notable Rocks Pirates though, Captain John has garnered particular importance due to the rumors of a legendary treasure he possesses, which he piqued the interest of none other than Buggy the Clown. So Captain John being shown as a dead zombie on Thriller Bark makes way too much sense along with the other rock zombies, because it makes a lot of sense to me that Captain John had to have died when the rocks lost on God Valley. Wang Ji is another significant member of the Rocks Pirates, and there are reports of his confrontation with Blackbeard on Hachinosu Island, adding to the intrigue surrounding this pirate crew. Wang Shi was also a zombie that was in the crowd of the Thriller Bark rock zombies. Now, Wang Shi was also shown on God Valley in chapter 1096 with the same mask that he normally wears. It appears that after Moria's defeat and the return of all the shadows to the zombies of the island, Wang Shi managed to retrieve his own shadow and subsequently made his way back to his hometown on Hachinosu Island. Indeed, in chapter 957, we discovered that Hachinosu Island is the very place where the Rocks Pirates were originally formed, providing a significant historical context to the events surrounding the island and its connection. Another notable Rocks Pirate known to both the readers and the story goes by the name of Silver Axe. His presence adds further depth and intrigue to the narrative. We can see that Silver Axe was to the right of Wang Shi in the crowd of rock zombies on Thriller Bark, and I'm thinking that Silver Axe must have been the final person shown on chapter 1096 with the Rocks Pirates crew, and I don't think it was Zebek, because it seems to me that this last shadow is one of the underlings of Roxy Zebek, is the final one in the lineup, and Oda is basically making us wait to see Roxy Zebek in the future. It's intriguing to note that there are a few unnamed Rocks Pirates who appear to be of significance, and their presence was foreshadowed in the story long ago, hinting at their eventual role in the narrative. Like, we see that there's a Headless Knight in the group of rock zombies in chapter 452. And fast forwarding all the way to chapter 1096 where we see the Rocks Pirates, we can see another Headless Knight all the way to the left. The knight in gray armor with a fishman-like appearance characterized by a wide face and small eyes is an intriguing character whose design adds to the mystique of the story. We can see that he lines up really well with the character we see to the far right of the Rocks Pirates lineup in 1096. It's also worth noting that there's a Rocks Pirate who employs claw-like fists, a detail reminiscent of some of the earliest designs we encountered of Marshall D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard. This parallel in character design adds an interesting layer of connection to the narrative. But again, turning our focus to the crowd of rock zombies on Thriller Bark, we can see that he lines up with a character to the far right in chapter 1096 lineup. And there's actually another star appearance in chapter 1096 that many fans haven't noticed. To the far right of the lineup, we have none other than Streusen, the executive chef of the Big Mom Pirates. In case you forgot who he is, he essentially knew Big Mom when she was a lot younger, and he manipulated her in many ways. This actually reminds me of a different character, Higurashi, the old witch lady that distracted Odin, leading to his defeat. This is the same woman who basically told Kaido to go to Wano and sell weapons, essentially manipulating him. Funnily enough, during Orochi's childhood, she swapped her face from Stussy to Shiki, implying that she was connected to the Rocks Pirates. That would mean that two Rocks Pirates, Higurashi and Streusen, both left the crew at God Valley and then paralleled each other by manipulating future Yonko. Honestly, none of that really pertains to today's theory, but I find it so interesting, so I wanted to share it with you guys. Now, bouncing back to the Thriller Bark arc, I did notice something that was really intriguing, but I just don't really know what to make out of it, and I'll just tell you guys about it anyways. When Absalom was entering the church after kidnapping Nami, we can see that there's a bunch of zombies crawling through the floor of the church in Thriller Bark. I think this is very reminiscent to how Saturn spawned through the floor of Egghead, crawling through a pentagram. This can purely just be a random coincidence with no kind of explanation, no kind of foreshadowing, but I just wanted to point that out. Maybe someone in the comments has some kind of details they can add. Now that we have a better understanding of these Rocks Pirates and their connection to the story, let's shift our focus to something of importance that we previously learned during the Egghead Island arc. Vegapunk, as a character with stellar knowledge, mentioned that there's a man from the West Blue who discovered the weight of souls. I strongly believe that this man in the West Blue Vegapunk is referencing is none other than Dr. Hogback, who is playing with dead zombies and dead people all the time. And again, we know that God Valley was located in the West Blue. And now let's hop into a time machine, because I noticed some very intriguing stuff from Big Mom's flashback that pertain to stuff we see in chapter 1096. We see that Mother Carmel met up with CP0 to talk about the underworld and all of the children she was trafficking. During that conversation, they mentioned that Mother Carmel is a shield of the world government. I think it's very ironic if this shield that they're talking about is the shield that plays into the Holy Knights, because we see in chapter 1086, Garling is the supreme commander of the Holy Knights. These guys have a role to protect the Celestial Dragons and to protect the Gorosei. It's fascinating to learn about the children from the Sheep's House who grew up and eventually became Holy Knights. This development adds depth to the story and the characters, so I'm gonna give you a few examples of who they could be. There's a kid in the Sheep's House to the right of Mother Carmel who has a crown and blonde hair. He looks strikingly similar to one of the Holy Knights that we saw in chapter 1096. For the next kid in the Sheep's House that became a Holy Knight, a lot of people think he was a CP0 member, but we'll talk about that in a second. In the Sheep's House, there's a kid with a very specific mask to the far left of Mother Carmel, which is again another character that appeared in chapter 1096 and was labeled as a Holy Knight. Now, both of these characters wield a sword, unlike the CP0 member who was using guns throughout the Onigashima arc. And keep in mind, as we said earlier, Mother Carmel was said to be the shield of the world government, which is the exact role that the Holy Knights are meant to play. But a significant number of these youngsters were present at Big Mom's grand feast. However, I would contend that they might have found a way to evade capture, or perhaps they were traded by Mother Carmel. The striking similarity in their appearance to the Holy Knights, or even CP0 if you want to explore that avenue, is quite remarkable. Regardless of which scenario you consider, it implies their survival, and Oda hasn't yet elucidated the specifics of how they managed to achieve it. Throughout the One Piece narrative, Oda frequently unveils the beginning and end of a storyline to the readers and gradually fills in the gaps until the complete picture emerges. I strongly believe that these children at the Sheep's House fall into this category because they seem to have grown up and became Holy Knights. Now let's turn our attention to Musketeers in the real world, because I strongly believe they're going to play into the Holy Knights. Musketeers from Great Britain and France became Musketeers because they were common regular citizens who rose up and earned their rank. So some of these Holy Knights could have been regular kids from the Sheep's House who rose up in the ranks, unlike Garling, because obviously Figureland Garling has Celestial Dragon blood in him. He is a Figureland, and this plays into why Shanks has so much political power and why he has all of these privileges, like meeting with the Gorosei, like having Sengoku take responsibility of the war, etc, etc. I could really go on all day, but I already have a video about that. So basically, 38 years ago, Garp used Galaxy Impact on the island of God Valley, causing it to shatter and kill off multiple Rocks pirates. Both Gecko Moria and Dr. Hogback arrived at God Valley in the West Blue, finding those dead pirates all over the place. This is how Dr. Hogback became notorious of learning the weight of human souls, as mentioned by Vegapunk. Vegapunk. Then years after that took place, both Gecko Moria and Dr. Hogback moved the final remaining piece of God Valley from the West Blue as mentioned by Moria. When that happened, they not only built a fortress around the Secret Holy Land, but they also renamed it to Thriller Bark. This is exactly how the island of God Valley vanished. It was shattered and then renamed. And this explains why 16 years ago in real life, we saw Rock's pirates all around the Thriller Bark island. And it also explains why Wang Shi left Thriller Bark to go back to his home island at Hachinosu.